All right, we're live. Sweet. And it's 10:01, so we can get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 14th Octant Community Meeting. Time flies. We recently cut the 19.0 release. We got a couple things on the notes today on HackMD. If there are any things to add on the agenda and or things for open Q&A, please feel free to chime in. And at the same time, there's also a YouTube stream that's going on simultaneously. So if I'll try to periodically look at the chat to reply to things if anything comes on there. I'll watch the chat. You don't have to worry. I'll watch it. Okay, cool. So I guess let's just jump right into it. Boom. All right. Step one. Wow, things just work. This is beautiful. Cool. So let's talk about a potential 19.1. I think we're going to need a patch release. Big one being that when we refactored the buttons in to be components, we copied and pasted the existing modal logic from the button group template. So there are scenarios in Octant where if you click a button, it'll pop up in two modals stacked on top of each other. And we don't want that. But this ties in, and I discovered this because of some refactor work that that's currently going on, but I can talk about that when we get to the last bullet point. And the next one is also client state. This one is specifically from a request internal to VMware, I believe. Yeah. So this is a client state uses a private struct. I'm going to expose this, and I think this is just a testing thing, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah. So it was discovered by a team that's building a plugin for Octant internally, but what they found was that their test started failing as a result of the client state changes because we were using internal structs, and they had no way to actually be able to mock those out because they couldn't create instances of that struct, and we weren't providing any interfaces to override. So ultimately, it didn't break them from the actual any plugin functionality, but we want to make sure that people's testing scenarios are working well and functioning. We've had similar things like this in the past with the logger. We lifted the logger interface up so that people could mock it out for testing purposes. So I think this is just a good candidate to stick into 19.1 because it's a compatible change, doesn't break anything, and lets people write some better tests.
Yep. Okay, cool. Any questions about that? Comments, concerns? All right. Cool. Then we'll move on. I think it's probably not too ambitious to get this out by this week, so we can look to this, and this should not change our 20 release cycle. So nothing really changes here, just two small fixes. All right. So next one, Luis is newly added as an approver. That's awesome. Is he on the call right now? Maybe. I can't tell when I'm sharing the screen. So. Oh, okay. Well,
that's awesome.
That's awesome. We're always looking to add more approvers. One of the things about an open source project is to have a healthy team of maintainers and approvers. And so we'd like to be growing that number over time. And so, Luis, thank you for all your hard work so far. And we're looking forward to continue working with you over the future. And additionally, general call out is that if anyone is watching this and likes to be contributing to Octant long term, there are some guidelines for how to become a maintainer and or how you'd like to go from a contributor to a maintainer. And we have the sponsor system where we like to have someone you pretty much have to tag your sponsors, right? Sponsors must have close interactions with the prospective member. So in other words, we'd like to see some activity in terms of code contributions, design, even docs. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be engineering contributions. And aside from that, once there are enough people wants to approve, then we'll just approve. And then you open an issue against the Octant repo, mention your sponsor. Sponsor says okay, and then we get more approvers. And then I think overall here the goal is to keep increasing that number, and also to have sponsors, especially from non-VMware companies. So anyone who's listening in and thinks Octant might be an interesting side project. Definitely feel free to reach out. And I think there are a lot of good opportunities in this problem space. Cool. Any questions about how we get new approvers, maintainers, or any additional questions or comments about that?
I think it's just approvers. Not maintainers.
Approvers? Sorry, I'm using those interchangeably.
I know, we adopted the official language from the Kubernetes community, so it's approvers.
Okay, approvers. I will use approvers. Yeah, because maintainer implies other admin powers on the repo,
Correct.
which
yeah. So being able to push a release tag and do things like that are a separate set of permissions over being able to land PRs and merge commits. So I think that's why there's that distinction.
That being said, I think there is a end goal, or at least not an end goal, but a near-term goal for Octant to change that governance model. So we definitely do want to maybe become a CNCF project, or try to have contributors come across from multiple companies. So it's not just a strictly VMware Tanzu owned project as it is currently.
Yeah, so the team will be hiring a community manager soon. I don't know exactly when. That's currently in flight, and I think there might be an open rec that I can. I don't know if it's open yet, but it will be soon if it's not already, and we can post it to get people applying. But the goal there would be to grow the existing community on the non-VMware company side. And as you see from our current community membership guidelines, we only have an approver defined, but that was intentional. And we're let's define one role, and then we'll grow those roles as the community grows. Because right now there's not there wouldn't be a huge advantage to defining 5 or 6 roles, considering that we don't have enough of a community to fill out those roles. So the reason that's kind of the logic behind having this approver role. We want to start to fill that with folks who are interested in becoming approvers, both other VMware folks and non-VMware folks. And then we would, once we have a established base of non-VMware people contributing, then we can add new roles that start to add extended privileges and extend the way we govern the project, even leading into us having an official governance model if necessary, as Sam mentioned, if we go the foundation route or something like that. So all that stuff's just in flight, and we're working on it, and encourage folks to join us and help us build something really cool.
Right on. Cool. Alrighty, then let's move on to the next one. So Homebrew. This one's kind of embarrassing. It's a bit of my fault. So Homebrew, I believe since ODOT 17, on the ODOT 17 release, when we migrated to Go 116, we were able to use the new embed feature, and that was super nice because it let us cut out some of the ACID embedding libraries, and we can just use Go now. And it changed a few things, namely in the pipeline, and we fixed all those, and we fixed some of like the CI and release issues, but the Homebrew formula slipped my mind, and so the tests were failing on the Homebrew formula, and they just kind of sat there across 2 releases because I wasn't aware of it, since they are automatic these days. So it's fixed now, so you could get an 0.19 right now. It might be a little moot since we are trying to do 19.1 soon. That being said, for this release, 0.20, we will have a brew tap for Electron releases. And brew tap is essentially just a GitHub URL that you can kind of add a tap to your Homebrew like on the command line, and it'll know to pull from specifically that URL. So like kind of like a PPA for Ubuntu, or I guess I don't know, or some, I don't know, analogous some other package manager. But the idea here is that we will have a separate repo that will have this brew tap, and we'll have the instructions to do it. And we're going to start pushing the installation step for the Electron release, because the plan at 1.0 is to stop actively maintaining the binary web server model, which we currently still have and will continue to ship. But just note that long-term support for that might not exist after 1.0.
Yeah, to add some, I'll clarify on that. The current console, the CLI binary that we ship, will no longer be part of the releases that we publish, but it will still be the core piece of Octant itself. It's just we want to move away from publishing that artifact and only be publishing Electron releases. So folks who ultimately want to do custom UIs or build things on top of that backend service will be pinning and building from a source. Like they'll have to build from source to get that asset.
Cool. And we can definitely like talk about how that would look, and even like hypothetically even have like the nightly still going indefinitely. I don't see, they're pretty low overhead at this point, but if someone has strong opinions about what about what this should look like, definitely call this out. Cool. All right, and last bullet point, fully moving to Clarity 5. So this one's kind of interesting. We did move to Clarity 5, I think last release, I believe. Or might be the release before that. They're starting to blur together. We're readopting the 2-week cadence, and sometimes I can't tell the previous release from the one before that. But we are using Clarity 5, and one interesting thing about Clarity 5 is that they currently have a set of Angular components, but they also introduced a sort of another class of web components called Clarity Core. And there is some overlap between these Clarity Core components and these Angular components. Like, for example, like icons, forms, modals, like very commonly used UI components. And the roadmap for this is interesting because the project maintainers in Clarity, they know that people are going to be using a combination of the two, but eventually the end goal is to move the majority of these Angular components over to these core web components. And so what this means for us is that we can still keep using these Angular components, which we do pretty much everywhere in Octant, but they will no longer have any additional support. So what this means is, like, if Clarity has an update, let's say they update their icons and they release like a new set of icons, we would not be able to use those unless we move over to those Clarity core icons. So there's a lot of strategic advantages to finish this adoption of Clarity 5, right? It's not just pinning to the next dependency. We are going to have to update the vast majority of our components to use these Angular components wherever, or use these core components wherever possible. There are going to be a few places where we will still have to use these Angular components. but I think overall, long term, we want to be on this side of the equation here, just simply because sooner or later we're going to have to do it, and it's probably easier to do it now. They talk about their support strategy, what's next, and there are caveats to this as well. Like, for example, if some of our moving to these core components would definitely break styling and CSS in certain places. And of course, it'll change the UI somewhat as well. And because these are web components, they will introduce shadow DOM, and those are somewhat difficult to style if we don't, if they're not quite styled kind of the way we're used to. So we might have to make some compromises in the UI as well. But even by compromises, I just mean like things will look different, not necessarily that it's worse. So it'll be some work. We probably should make a bunch of issues stemming from this move. And this is also a pretty good spot for a lot of first-time contributors as well. If people are interested in doing some of this move as well, it'll give a good introduction to what Clarity is and what component architecture might look like. So that's that in a nutshell. Any questions? Yep.
I think the important note here is that, some components will probably never be part of the CDS core, right? Like a data grid and some complex components. So we're going to have Angular pretty much with us, at least for a long time. And as for the adoption, I think we need to start that, but I think they're still fixing some issues, especially compatibility issues and differences in our layout look and things like that. So I would caution of us going a little too fast on this. Maybe it's better to wait a little bit on some components that are maybe even broken at this point or looking differently or hard to move over to. Maybe we can postpone those a little bit. But yeah, I think it's definitely a great idea to start that pretty soon.
Yeah, and I would even go as far to say this is a perfect situation to get that feedback for the Clarity people, right? Like if something is hard to do in Clarity 5, I'm pretty sure they'd be interested in doing it too. So we could definitely take this, like depending on what people's bandwidth look like, right? We could definitely wait till someone else figures it out. We could be very active or passive in this, depending on how we want to take it. But yeah, I totally agree. Some of the stuff is a headache. I've already started looking to what that actually means. And there are definitely more than one place that just, either the documentation's not up to date or things look kind of weird. And I don't quite know, like, if it's a CSS thing or web component thing. So so like definitely like where we shouldn't take this to an extreme. Cool. All right. Well, any other questions about Clarity 5 or components in general?
Yeah, no, that question, but I would like to show you what I'm working on. It's like a little sneak peek of the refactor of the bottoms. Now that you mentioned the move to Clarity 5, this work, Milan, just for I'm trying to do the migration from the buttons we had to the new Clarity buttons from Clarity 5, I'm working with the core. So I'm gonna share my screen and I want to ask you a couple of questions. So for example, here you can see like the different styles that I'm working. For example, we have status, we can have like success, info, danger, the disabled. We can have styles like outline, solid, or flat, things like that. And part of this is because we have like our default button for Octant is this type, is like outline and with the size smaller. And this is actually the default button from Clarity that is filled and a little bigger. So I want to ask you guys and the community if we want to keep like this as our default button, or we want to move to this one to be like more consistent with Clarity. What do you guys think? Or what do you like?
I definitely think we should keep our current styles if we can, unless there's a good reason to change.
Yeah, I mean, I think the size. I think there's two ways to approach it. We could add a size value similar to what we have for icons, which lets you increase the size of your button arbitrarily. But I think our default size should stay the same as it is now. So for this change, I would keep the default size and leave things as is. And then if we get a request for somebody saying we would really like to be able to make gigantic buttons or really tiny buttons or whatever, then we can extend the config to support various sizes, like for icons.
Yeah, I agree totally. So yeah, as I said, this is a sneak peek. I would like to do a demo the next week once this PR is merged to explain how it works. Because now we can have combination of styles. For example, this is a success button with an outline. So the community have like a more possibilities of styling their plugins. Yep, that's it.
Yeah, I wonder how Octants would stack. Like, I know it uses Clarity, so it's already probably pretty decent. I wonder how it would stack up in an accessibility audit, whether or not we're using some of these Clarity components in the way they were intended to be used. Because as far as I know, no one actively checks for that stuff, right? We just kind of shim in a couple of features that make it more usable for screen readers and such. But things like whether or not our default button sizes are large enough or whether or not it's adjustable, although we can eventually add electron-wide integrations, like preference type integrations, where we can make all of Octant, make all of the buttons look a certain way, or make all of the fonts look slightly differently, or change spacing. I think that's in the near future. So maybe it's a long-winded way of saying things are okay exactly the way they are now, because even if someone's not okay, we're going to give the tools to change it anyways.
I did some accessibility testing, and I think we are pretty good. There are a few places where we are not compliant. For example, one of them is navigation. I think the font is a little too small on the navigation. But most of the things are pretty good. And since we don't require compliance right now, we didn't do much work there. One thing about components is Storybook has a plugin that does that testing for you automatically. So basically, you can add it. It's like additional panel, right, for the knobs, for example. Now, so if you add that a plugin, it will test accessibility for your component basically, and tell you all the problems right there. So I think that might be something I should probably add sooner rather than later, just to at least make us aware that there might be a few things that we need to work on.
Yeah, totally. Feel free to capture some of this stuff also in a GitHub issue. We can definitely add it to a sprint as part of a regular workload.
Right. I'll open an issue. It shouldn't be hard to use. I used it before. It's pretty simple, and it's kind of neat. You can just open your component and then go to that pane, and it will scan the page and tell you all the issues it finds.
All right. Anything else about buttons or general Q&A? If anyone has any questions. Cool. There's nothing else. I think we can call it, and we'll get some time back for the day. All right. Thanks for coming out, y'all. Take care.